So thank you very much, everyone. And my name is Mina Radovic, and as the founder and director of Liberating Cinema, I have the pleasure to welcome you to tonight's launch, the Liberating Cinema launch tonight. I'll start by saying a few words about Liberating Cinema, and then I'll introduce our distinguished guest, Amos Gitai, who will give us tonight's masterclass. So Liberating Cinema is a non-profit charitable organization based in Edinburgh, committed to the representation, restoration, and exhibition of world cinema heritage. Liberating Cinema grew out of the Liberating Cinema film series, which I founded at the University of St. Andrews in 2015. And the Liberating Cinema film series has run since 2015 at British universities, providing a platform for premiering films and bringing in dialogue filmmakers, industry, and academia. I'd like to introduce and thank my fellow members of the Board of Trustees, Indrashish Acharya, who's joining us from Calcutta, and Dr. Stephen Martz, who's joining us from Edinburgh, our treasurer. Thank you. Now, to turn, if you have any questions, I'd ask you to please raise your hand using the raise hand function or to message me personally, and then we can pose them in the second half of this event. So I'll start by introducing Amos Gitai, and I'm honored and delighted to have Amos Gitai with us here tonight. Amos is a distinguished director and one of the finest filmmakers working today. He was born in Haifa in Israel in 1950, the son of a Bauhaus-trained architect, Munio Weinraub, who fled the Nazi regime, and the intellectual and teacher Efratia Gitai, who was born in Palestine in the early 20th century. He belongs to the first generation born after the foundation of the State of Israel, and this is also strongly influenced, strongly influenced by the major anti-establishment youth movements of the 1960s. While he was still a student studying architecture, Gitai was wounded during the Yom Kippur War, and his entire oeuvre went on to draw inspiration from these biographical family and generational themes, as well as the trauma he suffered during the war. He received a PhD from the University of Berkeley, California, and after that, in 1980, he made his first feature film, House. What followed is a career of 40 years with more than 50 films, as well as creation of over 90 artworks in a variety of domains, including television, theater, architecture, installation art, and experimental works of different kinds. He was I would just like to highlight some films: his trilogy that begins with House, several trilogies to follow, including trilogy of cities, trilogies on world capitalism, trilogy of borders, and trilogies of historical events decisive for Israel. I would also personally like to highlight the film Kippur, one of the finest anti-war films, and the one-shot masterwork Ana Arabia, as well as the most recent films, the documentaries Rabin, The Last Day, and the film West of the Jordan River. His most recent film played at the Venice Film Festival in 2020, Laila in Haifa, and he's here with us tonight to give us a masterclass. He'll be talking about his film directing, his unique approach to film, the influence of architecture on his work, and how he how he used this influence to also create cinematic space, a really unique cinematic space. And he will also tell us a little bit about why he chose Rabin, The Last Day as the film for this week's viewing that you had available to view through our website for the last week. Now, I'd like to leave the floor to Amos. Afterwards, we'll have questions, and thank you very much for being with us here. And I welcome you to Liberating Cinema, and I look forward to tonight's event and to future events. Thank you. Please, Amos.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Mina. I'm happy to join you. I mean, in this strange format that modernity brings us in these days, which is this kind of digital conversations. No, as Mina mentioned, I'm just an architect. I was formed as an architect. I got my diploma architect in Israel, in Haifa, my hometown. And then I went and did a master and PhD in architecture in Berkeley. When I was in Berkeley, like Berkeley is a great academic center, I studied philosophy of science, Steve, so we can speak about it. I studied Marxist economy of the third world, and also architecture. But I think that that's the nature of great academic institutions, that they help you little by little find out what you really want to talk about. And what I decided finally, after having all the stamps, that I can be an architect, or at least academically I can be an architect, meaning that I paid my debt to the family spirits, because as Mina mentioned, my father was a Bauhaus architect, was a student of Kandinsky, of Mies van der Rohe, etc. So after I collected all the stamps, I decided to do something else. And my first film was a documentary, which is actually stored at the BFI. I understand that there is somebody here from the BFI. No? Who is from the BFI here? No? You mentioned somebody from the BFI.
I'm naming them, David. I'm sorry I'm calling you out. It's nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
So the BFI was actually one of the first institutions which conserved this film that I did exactly 40 years ago. The film was finished in December 1980, meaning exactly 40 years ago. And the film was produced and censored by the television in Israel. It's a very calm film, which accumulates contradictions, you know. Israelis and Palestinians, they all come and tell a fragment of their biography. And little by little, this film ties together these relations to a single house, which is in West Jerusalem, which is claimed by everybody. So in a way, the film is a documentary, including argument from all these people from different origin. At the same time, it's a parable, it's a metaphor of Jerusalem, which is claimed by many nations. But it is more than that, it's a call to understand the contradiction and to understand the other. So as I mentioned, the film, when I finished the film, which was shot with a team of the Israeli television technician, the film was blocked from censorship. And then I continued 2 more documentaries, Field Diary, which also, there is a copy at the BFI, or at least there used to be a copy at the British Film Institute, and Wadi. And after doing, let's say, I would say the first 10 years is really mostly about documentaries. With one exception, in 1985, I did a fiction film, Esther, which is a biblical story of the scroll of Esther, which is in the Bible. And this film is a series of tableaux vivants. And again, it is a kind of a metaphor. The film was shot by a wonderful French director of photography, Henri Alcan, who also did the work with Cocteau. He did La Belle et la Bête. He also worked with Wim Wenders. He did the Wings of Desire and many others. So little by little, I started to acquire this field of filmmaking, which I never actually studied academically. In more recent years, I was teaching cinema. I was teaching both in Berkeley and in Columbia in New York. And I did a series of masterclass, including in India, in Japan, and elsewhere. So I'm very much into the group of people who like to study one thing and get the challenge of transposing it to another discipline. And the difficulty of using parameters which come from architecture, and how can you transpose architectural methods into filmmaking. I think also cinema theoretically need to be refreshed, otherwise we'll walk straight into the field of producing Netflix products, very shining, very polished. And I think that we need to have people engaging with cinema and redeveloping this great medium, but challenging some of the essential parameters of what is cinema, how can it tell us a story, not in a linear, tight scenario manner. And I have to admit that the best films that I've seen in my life start when the screening is over. Because then you walk back and you have this series of images, and you have to work out the meaning of these images which were beamed on you. So I would say that if you look at a film by Pasolini or Bresson or Rossellini or Abbas Kiarostami or many others, or Samuel Fuller, etc., people from different origins and different nationalities, you will have to figure out, you have to work as rather as an interpreter and not necessarily as a consumer. And this is, frankly, this is the kind of cinema that I like both to do, but I also like to experience as a spectator. We'll speak eventually about the economic reality of this cinema, which is it's another set of questions. So to go back to the challenge of transposing architecture into cinema, I think it is a challenge, but also there are many common things. Both mediums are not they're not intimate arts. They are not somebody sitting next to a piece of paper writing text or next to his computer or her computer. It's not somebody in front of a canvas painting. It is, you need to work with a group of people to motivate them, to give them a sense of common challenge. And I think that that's true both about architecture and cinema. So when we come on a stage in Cannes or Venice or wherever we are, and we mention the name of other people, it's not sheer politeness, but we have to do it because it is a collective endeavor in which people in different levels contribute to this edifice, which is a film. And since I'm here to defend this kind of artisanal, this craftsmanship for the fabrication of film, it means that cinema is not just written and executed, and I use the word executed in the negative sense intentionally, but we need to write a script or a project of a documentary, but once we have written it, we need to interpret it into filmmaking. We have to re-ask the essential questions. Once we have decided where to shoot it and how to shoot it and how to do the casting, and once we filmed it, we will modify it again by editing it, by mixing it. So it's a series of decisions, continuous decision methodologically, which do not end just by a very polished, beautiful script, which has to be shot and executed by the letter. And I think that in a similar way, architecture and cinema are similar. I think that the horrors that we see of some of the architecture is that it is designed in some office, probably distant from the site, and executed on the site. So metaphorically, if there will be a tree, they will bulldoze it. If they will cut it. If there will be a little hill, they will flatten it to adopt to the project which is preconceived. In cinema, in the same way, if you have the particularity of an actress or an actor, and in many cases, it would be interesting and a good challenge to integrate the particularity of these people, to integrate the particularity of the set that you shoot, sometimes even the noise that you would hear. So it can have a multi-layered attitude and not just leaning to the methodology of executing a script or written form. That's maybe a moment to say that my two parents, my father I mentioned was an architect of the Bauhaus, and my mother was a thinker and a storyteller. Her letters, she wrote over 1,000 letters, which were published in different languages, in French by Gallimard, in Italy, recently in New York by the Primo Levi Foundation, in Portuguese, in Brazil, and so on. And so she was a great storytelling. And so in a way, I have these two guys who co-produced me. One is an architect, and so it's about form, and the other one, the woman, is about storytelling, a narrative, and telling the history of Israel. And so this was a good beginning to make movies, because you need both the narrative, the subject, the thematics. and you need the form. Cinema, which is only formal but empty of any meanings, is for me not a good film. And cinema, which is only content or even message, as highly politically motivated as can be respected, but has no formal attitude, for me is not a film either. It's a pamphlet, it's whatever it is. So by definition, not to speak too many badly about my dear colleagues, but let's say I'm not very much into the commentaries of Michael Moore, because I think that if you feel that you have to force an opinion, I think that it's weak. You have to make people think. It's a good beginning. And now, people have almost asked me, and I'm reaching the question of Mina, why did I decided to show you the film I did on the assassination of the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin this year, exactly a quarter of a century ago, 25 years ago. Rabin was shot on the 4th of November, 1995. So, because and they said, does art or cinema have impact on the real world, on the reality? It's a bit, the answer is a bit complicated in my mind. Cinema or art do not have a direct impact on the real world. And maybe it's not even the purpose, but if they make people think, it's a good beginning. I think there are much more effective manners and instruments to change opinions, like direct politics, like machine guns, all of these instruments and methods have a direct impact. But cinema and the arts have an impact. And I like sometimes to quote the procedure that Pablo Picasso had when he chose to do the painting of Guernica that we all know. So Pablo Picasso, in my mind, in 1936, when he was aware of the bombardment by the Luftwaffe of the Basque village of Guernica, did the painting also as a civic gesture. He wanted to, through his prisma of a painter, he wanted to register his opinion about this brutal treatment of Guernica, of this village. But then also Picasso used the sanction that artists have. He forbid the traveling of the Guernica to Spain as long as Franco was alive. And he said in his testimony that the painting can go back to Spain only after the death of Franco. So finally, when Franco died, the MoMA wanted to keep the painting longer, but this was the will of Picasso. Now, if we want to watch the Guernica, we have to go to Madrid, to the Reina Sofia, and we can see the painting. So let's ask ourselves, so what impact did this painting have, if any? So we know that last year, for some strange situation in Spain, they elected a socialist prime minister. And this prime minister decided to my great astonishment, as the head of his priorities, to take out the bones of Franco from the Kitsch mausoleum and take it away and put in this mausoleum the remains of warriors of the civil wars, not just Franco. And you ask yourself, why did he put it, why did it happen? It only happened because people like Picasso, like militant, like writers, kept the memory of this brutal civil war, which was preparing in a way the horrors of the Second World War. People kept this memory. So cinema is also an archive, a conservation of memory, in the hope or in the meaning that someday this memory, like the memory that there was an Israeli leader that at some point considered very important to try to make an effort to reconcile the conflict with the Palestinians. So the memory, which will be kept by by films, by text, by so on, will make its own way against revisionists and people who want to rewrite history in the name of patriotism. And since, Mina, since you are from Serbia, so you know that people who claim to be the great patriarch, like Milosevic, they also destroy their own country because they bring it to a suicidal position. So in front of a measured attitude. And so the result is that Yugoslavia used to be considered the most open country of the Eastern Bloc, was smashed into pieces because of the takeover by extreme nationalists and all the disastrous atrocities that they committed. So I think that for me, cinema is a civic activity, but in a cinematic form, which is not indoctrinated, which is not pushing, trying to feed you by a spoon, but making you think, and not hiding from having an opinion, but not instrumenting the very mechanism of cinema and reducing it to a propagandistic instrument, even for what we can call the good cause. No. So we need the distantiation, we need the different instruments that we need to keep as part of the procedure of filmmaking. I would say also, you know, I feel that with this attitude, I don't feel that I have been, I mean, several of my films were in 7 competition in Venice, other big group of films in Cannes, in Berlin, in the MoMA, in Pompidou, and so on. And the question is, as an individual, is how do you use these occasions to speak about things that you care, and how not to be consumed by the love of red carpets just for the sheer of red carpets. But when you have an occasion, you can try to say something which is meaningful. And I have met also good people along my road who helped me to protect from the beginning Hubert Bals in Rotterdam, Paul Willeman in the BFI, Jan Christie, and other people, and Alan Fountain and the Channel 4, and then the French who have helped a lot of my films. So I think that we have to stay open and optimistic and keep the dialogue open, and I'm looking forward to hear your questions.
Amos, did you want to say anything else, or would you like to open up this discussion?
No, let's open up. Let's have a conversation.
Oh, good. Okay, who would like to ask the first question? Maybe I can start while people get their questions together. I wanted to ask you, Amos, thank you. And thank you for what you pointed out as well. This is a very kind of, especially the claiming what you said about kind of the relationship between, well, nationalism and kind of what it does to countries that were previously open. I think you're quite right and spot on. So, but I wanted to ask you about Rabin, The Last Day. What fascinated me is that you're a filmmaker that integrates kind of parts which are acted out and more traditional documentary in quite experimental ways. And you can't quite tell, like I think a lot of filmmakers, even ones that are quite well known in festivals and beyond, they do this quite obviously, whereas you did very subtly, and it's sometimes very difficult to tell which part is the actual part you shot like with actors and which part is the documentary footage or the archival footage. So I think especially with reference to Rabin, The Last Day, I would ask you how do you choose? I mean, how do you bring this together, and what kind of influences your choices? You know, in making this, in making the documentary.
No, it's as you said, it's not a documentary. It's a mixture of certain things which are fictional, meaning that they are actors, and some archives. So I would not call it documentary. Also, I think that we have to make a distinction. I think that the boundaries have been too blurred between what is a documentary and what is fiction. We call everything a documentary when it's talking about something which actually happened. And I think a documentary is a great medium, but it's not fiction. Fiction, you have actors that are being paid a salary, and documentary is the people really involved. And Rabin is not a documentary. It's we're taking the actual event of the assassination of Rabin and building around it elements which I don't know. Everybody, have you watched the film prior to our conversation? Or Steve, for instance, did you watch the film or not?
No, I haven't watched it recently. No, sorry.
Did anyone watch it here?
Yes.
Who is it?
A few of us. Me. Matthew. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, because I think that if I'm just describing a film that people didn't watch, it's not my habit to summarize the cinema. So who watched it? You watched it. Who else watched it? Anyone else?
I watched it as well.
Oh, okay. So it's not really not, and the issue is really to distinct between to identify what is fiction, what is acted, what is composed, what is choreographer, a kind of a choreography of cinema, and what is archive. The archive of the film is, I would say, between 5 and 7% of the film. It's not so big, and because we actually don't have real images of the actual assassination. Strangely enough, in this world that you have cameras covering everything, you don't have, the actual assassination was not filmed. So there is a guy who was standing on a roof with a little video camera and by coincidence captured some images, but not the actual shooting. And so the question was how to construct a film which is completely dedicated to the assassination of a political figure without having archive or documents of this. Also, I think that I quite agree with some filmmakers who did films about similar political events and who decided not to enact the lead figure, not to enact, let's say, Kennedy, and I decided not to enact Rabin, not to put an actor in the lead role, but to construct it around it, so the Rabin himself becomes the big hole, the big black hole around this event, around which the film is built.
Amos, thank you. I'm getting messages, so I think around probably up to half the people watched it. So we do have quite a good proportion who have seen it.
Let them go ahead and ask questions.
Yeah. I received actually a question, so maybe I received a question privately, so maybe I can ask: is every film about the Holocaust a civic activity?
I don't like to generalize, you know. Also, I don't know. I mean, I think it's too general as a question. I don't think I can answer it. Try with another.
I'm sorry. Hello, Amos. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I have a question, actually a lot of questions, but I'll try to limit myself. First, was that you actually like cameo in the Rabin the last day? I saw you. You were the policeman, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, so I did recognize you. Yes, that was a nice touch.
Yeah,
Did you want to be the policeman who says take that scumbag, or why did you?
No, some films I think you need to, you know, originally, as I mentioned before, I was an architect. My first films, I was not so much interested in acting, you know. So my first trilogy on exile, Esther and Berlin, Jerusalem, and The Golem, I would say that for me, actors, it's putting text in landscape. It's the way that I would put text in landscape. So I needed to vehicle it through actors. And then my fourth film, which is called Devarim, I was looking for an actor who would be really passive. And I couldn't find an actor who would be passive enough, because acting was poisoned by Stanislavski, so everybody's very want to be very expressive, and I didn't want somebody. I wanted somebody just to sit with a straight face and hardly moving, and nobody. So I decided to act it myself. When I acted in this film, in front of me was a very talented Israeli actor, Asi Dayan, who is also the son of Moshe Dayan, who was a very talented actor. And he gave me tips how an actor should behave, you know. And because I can hardly learn text by heart. So he told me the famous story about Marlon Brando, who was kind of, that when he's looking kind of very severely, and we all think that it's a big expression, he basically is looking where they stick his text, you know, on the floor, or where is it, you know. So I acted myself. And from this point on, I started to understand because I went through the experience. So I would say that a lot of things that I learned about filmmaking, I learned by experiencing them, not by theoretically studying them. And also, as a principal, I took really wonderful people to work with me. I mentioned Henri Alcan, the director of photography. All my first film, the sound, was Antoine Bofanti, who invented the direct sound in French cinema with Godard, with Alain René, Edith Muriel. And he was telling me about direct sound. I worked with Pina Bausch, who did the choreography of 2 films. Hannah Shigula, Bertolucci played in a couple of films, Philippe Garel, Marceline Loridan. So I was surrounded by all these people. Samuel Fuller played. And then I could actually constructed my own school, having these people work for me. You know? So to go back to your small question, so sometimes I like just for fun to play a small role.
Yes, I noticed that in other films as well.
Yeah.
I think
I'm also the driver of Juliette Binoche, and also with Jean Moreau, I played a little role and so on. Yeah.
Yes. And can I ask you, what was the reception of your film, Rabin, The Last Day? What was the reception in Israel?
I mean, some people liked it and others didn't.
Yes. But is it still politically, sensitive, or?
I think so, because the guy who was speaking against him and inciting against him is in power, almost with very brief interruptions for the last 25 years.
And you have in the film this religious group, or religiously inspired, like right wing or something like that, religiously inspired group. Is that still the case? I mean, does religion inform these activities, do you think? I mean, not just in Israel, but this is concrete.
I don't like to generalize it. So I would not say all the religious are like that. And, you know, obviously they are different, but there were religious groups who really incited against him. And also the right wing. And you know, the situation is that this effort to move forward has stopped. And now, not just in Israel, but we are in a world that we have a lot of despotic characters. You know, we saw what was in America until recently. You know, we know the guy leading in Britain with all these wonderful projects, and Erdogan, and etc. etc. We have a long list in Brazil, and so I think that we are in a stage that we will have to reconsider the impact of all these figures on the world situation.
And sorry, can I just ask you? I noticed that you have the same music in Rabin, The Last Day, and in the west of the Jordan River.
But it's not just that. I like, you know, there is a French critic called Jean-Michel Frodon, who was the head of the Cahiers de Cinema and so on, and he has a theory that I have a kind of a phantoms, and they travel from one project to another. And I think that both thematics and music and even text which would travel from one project to another. Sometimes they would even go, because I did recently more theater piece. Sometimes I like to use the same actresses or actors in different, to show that they have a big palette of performance, that they can do very different things. So I like to dig into it. And because you know that music is also about variations of a theme. So I like to do variation of a theme. That's why Mina was right in the beginning when he spoke about the structure of trilogies, because I think that I do trilogies, and when we spoke about Wadi and Ana Arabi, I like to do trilogies because the Middle East is so complex and contradictory. And you cannot have just by a single piece everything. And sometimes it's really, I think, instructive to have different angles looking at the different project of different thematics that you want to deal with.
Thank you very much, Amos. I have another question that I received. So can films that are seen as having international artisanship deliberately seek to combat denial of historical events, such as atrocities, which grows in nationalist milieu, which are ostentatiously anti-cosmopolitan?
That sounds very intelligent. What do you think?
I would ask maybe the person who posed the question if they want to ask it as well. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, ask them what they think.
Hi, it was me. I'm George. I'm academic here in Edinburgh, and I do think regularly about the question of denial in Bosnia, the Holocaust, and I wonder whether there are very cultured, let's call them nationalists, or anti-cosmopolitans, who feed off
George, you're breaking up.
Denial.
I mean, you know that Stalin
Was that?
Sorry. Did I cut you? Is it okay? No, I know. You know that Stalin used to accuse the Jews of being cosmopolitan. I think it's a compliment, you know, because it means that you know, not in general, but those who were active wanted to improve living condition, understanding between nations, and so on. And they did not take a nationalist point of view. So I think that by that, those Jews contributed to understanding between people. And for me, the accusation that Stalin, but not only Stalin, a lot of anti-Semite, accuse certain Jews of being cosmopolitan. I think that they are, you know, the word Ivrim, the Hebrews, what, you know, what is the meaning, the original meaning of the word? The meaning is that people across the river. So it means that from the beginning of this group, they were crossing rivers, they were crossing borders, they were moving from one place to another. And in many cases, they contributed to culture, to civilization, to cultivating modesty, human rights, etc. So not all of them, obviously, but like no other group is homogeneous. But I think to go back to your question, I think that the minorities, like the Jewish existence in the diaspora, contributed to the extension of human rights and tolerance.
Yeah, feel free, Chris.
Hi, thank you, Mina, and good to see you, Amos. I really enjoyed your introduction. I was just thinking about the religious reception of Rabin and other films? I know you did a film on Esther, is that right? A couple of decades ago.
Kadosh also.
Yeah. And so I was just sort of wondering how different religious groups or secular groups responded to your films, and whether you in turn thought very differently about your own work in relation to the reception that your films garnered.
No, as I mentioned, you know, I have to sail my way and to say what I think. You know, as you probably know, I was in the Yom Kippur War, and I was shot on my birthday. I was 23, when I was in a rescue unit trying to collect people who were burning in the tanks, bring them to hospital. So I mean, some of my colleagues were killed. And when I came back, I decided that I'll say what I think. And I will not be deterred or scared, you know, because I was already scared, like any human being, when I was shot, especially in a helicopter. You know that the Air Force called my mother and they told her in a dry manner that statistically a helicopter shot while flying, nobody comes back. So, because the helicopter cannot glide, it's not like a jet that you can glide. The helicopter falls down. So I would say what I think, and essentially also my discussion with religious people is that I think that to continue also what I answered the previous person is that I think that the great contribution also of the Jewish thought, without myself being a religious person, which I'm not, is that it is a critical thought. It is a critical thought. Because the Jews don't, first of all, they're not into conversion. They are not like the other monotheists who want the others to be like them. Actually, the Jews don't want to convert the other, and it's quite a mess to become a Jew. You know, it's a complicated project to become a Jew. And then it's a critical thought in the sense that they don't have a delegate of God on earth. They don't have Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha. And even the most mighty figures in the history of the Jews, like Moses, are considered for some strange reason they have committed a sin, and that's why they're imperfect. So the thought is about non-perfection. And then the Old Testament also want to encourage us to be critical, because in the biblical text, the most mighty king, which is David, is considered to be an immoral guy. And the prophet Nathan goes to him and says to him, you, the king, you are immoral because you desired Bathsheba and you sent her husband to be killed in the war. So you are immoral guy. Now we can ask ourselves, how come the chief editor of the Old Testament, whoever it is, he or she, who was probably paid by the Davidic house, kept for the record of the DNA of the next generation that you are entitled to criticize power. It is part of the DNA of this school of thinking. And I would even go further than that. I would think that you would not have Einstein or Freud or Marx without this attitude that you are completely entitled to. Einstein can have respect to Newton, but at the same time, he can say, okay, Newton is fine, but I can also contribute my own thing into it. So I think that the fact that religion in this day is in its very reactionary phase, so you don't have really great thinkers like the Maimonides who let's say, who studied the Greek philosophy. Now, no rabbi, they would consider it a sacrilegious thing to study Greek, or to study the Greek great philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and so on. They were not, okay? So I think the religions enter a kind of a conservative reactionary phase. But I would have the same debate, the same answer I'm giving to your question to them, and I did. I did. I'm not, and I'm willing to go on and debate with them what is the profound, because obviously in every religion, like Bernard Shaw wrote about, you know, the great text of Bernard Shaw, Androkulos and the lion. When you speak about Jesus historically, say Jesus was a revolutionary, probably social consciousness and so on, but the church realized that this guy will, if they will teach really his thinking, he will menace the institution. So they had to make him this weak figure on the cross. They had to convert the historical figure. So all the religions have an institutional problem, but humankind at the same time, I understand, and that's why I'm willing to go discuss with religious people. People cannot live only material life. They need spiritual life, but it doesn't mean that they have to adopt a strict orthodoxy of the religion. I know I didn't answer completely your question, but yeah.
No, it was just fascinating to hear the whole sort of interdisciplinarity around that and the different groups that you've been engaged with or networking and thinking through a whole process. That was really elucidating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for jumping in. I see you as a figure as a prophet Amos. Am I right?
It's not. I'm you know, you know, the way I sign my film. Actually, my son, who helped me to arrange this Zoom thing technically, he wanted to put under my name, because normally I sign Amos Gitai, architect and film builder, making reference to the architecture. You know.
Thank you, Amos. Thank you, Chris. I had another question. Could you speak to your process in finding and selecting your archival material? So,
I mean, I would say that in every film, first of all, before I answer this question, you know, every film has its own time. Basically, I would make a film for two main reasons: or when something is very touching to me, or when something really pisses me off. So I need to have this emotional charge to make a movie. This is even before the archive. Secondly, being formed as an architect, I like to select the site where I will shoot, even before casting the film. Because let's say, when I did Kippur, I decided to shoot it intentionally in the real bunkers on the Golan Heights where the war was going on. It's connected to the context, to the time. I shot the film at the time that was maybe most optimistic that Israel and Syria were negotiating a peace agreement, so I could shoot actually next to the real bunkers on the border. I think today, with the tensions of the Middle East, I would never be able to do the film. So you have to shoot, especially in the Middle East, which is so fragile, let's say, and volcanic. You have to choose the right moment to do the shooting. So I would say time, then the place. Then I would go, even before the archive or not archive, then I would go to the casting. And when I do casting, I don't like anymore to do just mechanical reading, but I would meet with an actress or an actor. And if I find that they can do the role, I will give them the role. I've done it again and again, even recently. And I'm also interested in their own biography and the way that I can help them to interweave their personal experiences into the experience of the subject of the film. I liked a lot what one day the French actress Jeanne Moreau told me when I worked with her, and she said to me that she will only decide to make a movie or a theater piece if she can learn something that she does not know already. And I think that that's very particular, meaning that actors or actresses who just do it mechanically, things that they've done many, many times, I'm less interested. But if it's a process of research in which the actress or the actor will try to discover through the process things that they don't know already, then I'm on also. So I think that it's like I would say scientific research. You know, a mathematician, he will have probably an equation and in space, and he would like to discover the question that the question has to answer, and he will make a formula, and the film is my answer to the question that I want to ask. In it, obviously, there is the question of sources and archive, which sometimes start in the beginning, to understand the context, to learn about it, to know as much as I know, things that I would not necessarily use in the film, but will tell me that I'm going in the right zone, that I don't say nonsensical thing. And so some of the archives will fire them way into the film in some way or another, and some not, but they will enlarge my knowledge to go back to Jean Moreau.
Thank you, Amos. I have another question that have come through. If this, it kind of ties also to what you were speaking about, the kind of the political reception. If this film, meaning Rabin, was screening nowadays, would the public react differently since Netanyahu is prime minister?
No, the film was done 5 years ago. He was already prime minister.
Okay. But maybe, okay. But was the political reception, I mean, where you mentioned earlier, some people didn't like it, some did. Is there anything in the kind of reception of Rabin?
I think it's normal, you know. I don't expect everybody to agree with me, and it's not obligatory to agree with me. I have my own reading of this historical event, and obviously the politicians in power have more instruments to influence people. I say what I think, that's it.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce, maybe he'd like to join the discussion, Feja Stukan. He's also an actor from Bosnia who we have here. He's joining us from, I think Sarajevo. Feja, do you want to join us?
Oh yeah, how are you? Do you hear?
Yes, we can see the GoPro. Can you put on you have the camera or no?
Yeah, I'll put headphones. I don't have any smart question. I just saw some similarities between us, if I can say. So my parents they are all architects, and my sister too. I worked with a lot of directors. I'm an actor from Sarajevo. The last film I did is with Terence Malick. It's a film about Jesus. We did it in Morocco last year. I'm waiting for the final cut now to see what we've done. And I'm from Sarajevo, so what else was very connecting me with all that story is that I'm also, you were speaking about helicopters. I'm a pilot of one, and I was a SWAT team during the war and a sniper. And actually I wrote a book that tackles the religious, the religion and global religion and nationalism and patriotism, which in my country are always going together. So, and the right wingers are always here, at least are believers. So I wrote a book now that will be a part of the curriculum in London in the Goldsmith University on the subject of history. And I see that we are very in common. I mean, that we are looking at the things very, very similarly. So I would really like to suggest, and I will send you the book here in the PDF so you can read it if you have time. And I would really love to hear what you think about it, because we have a same, we're thinking the same things, and we are on the different side of the world, but the problems are the same everywhere, especially now with Trump and right wingers, and also when I was in Israel, I was there in a film festival in Arava Film Festival with a film that I worked in Spain with Fernando León de Aranoa. So also movie about the war. So next time when Nina called me for this meetings, I would like to call also you and Fernando León de Aranoa if you are willing to
Oh, with pleasure. Yes, please send me the book. Mina has my address, and
I will
he
send.
managed to chase me all over the planet, so it's good.
So this I will put the PDF here if I can. I'm not sure.
If
Yeah.
I send it to Mina, and he will forward it to me.
Andrew, you can send it to me too, yeah. Or put it in the chat and then send me it as well.
Okay, but I will also like that other people here in this chat also can read it. It's for free. Usually you would pay for it, but I want to give it to the world.
Thank you, Feja.
So, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Amos, did you want to say something, or should I just go with the next question? Would you?
Oh, go on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Does anyone else have a question? Feel free to now. Yeah. Enter.
Yeah, I really feel embarrassed now. While other people are thinking about possible questions, I'm really interested in this, well, in several of your films, but I wanted to ask you also about the west of the Jordan River. How on earth did you make that mosaic? I actually wrote an article about this film, about your film, and about trying to understand how you build this cinematic space and how these diverse spaces of Israel are, you know, present somehow in the film. It was very, very, what is the word I'm looking for? Very, full of contrasts. So it's a completely different experience of the country and the film itself, and it keeps being very unpredictable in a way, but it has a structure. It has a, I don't know how.
No, because I think that, as I said, this conflict is also very contradictory, and like many conflicts, it's not so simple division between angelic people and bastards, but both are both, maybe in different proportions, but they are. And also, I was to make an homage to the different human rights organizations which are active, because I think that they try to draw maybe some sense of direction beyond the conflict, you know. So again, this is a film I did. Sometimes I did films like this one, or when I traveled with Rabin to Washington or to Cairo when he negotiated, that I feel that this medium that we have, which this incredible medium, sometimes give us the legitimacy to be present and see things that we are interested as citizens to watch. You know, I don't think that I would be able to go to Washington or to Cairo, commissioned by Arte to do 4 films on this negotiation in 1993-94, if I didn't have the camera. So this, I did now a lecture, I told Steve at the beginning for Collège de France about that the camera is a kind of a fetish, and this instrument allows us, creates legitimacy to be present. So I would say in west of the Jordan River, it's also this case, you know, because of, or thanks to this camera, I was be able to watch certain things, and I would to say that the human rights organization were opening the doors and allowed me to see how they brief women, Palestinian women in Hebron, about using video cameras, and how actually the very act of holding a video camera also changed dynamics within the Palestinian society. So women are not just making children and cooking, but they're also more active, more articulating questions which are general. So it's this very little object, this frame, is also creating another dynamic. So I was, this is a film that, while doing it, I learned things that I was interested in.
Thank you, Amos. I received messages in the chat with so David Somerset, who's a curator at the BFI, who was here. He thanked you, and thanked you for this talk. He had to leave, and also Professor Chris Deasy, who's head of religion at Kent University. I've also had a question from another question. Just let me see. What topics? I mean, I'm not sure if this was from David or from someone else. What topics occupy directors in Israel?
What topics?
Yeah, like for film. Yeah.
So you have all these series which are relatively popular, like Fauda and the series of this sort. So it's kind of the Israelis, Superman, very macho, very active, kind of military guy, and so on. So I think that's very successful, you know. So and I think we have a great variety. I would say Israeli cinema has a great variety. Also, it is very vocal, very present. So I think that that we have many subjects. Also, religion, which was mentioned here. You know, you have many subjects.
Is there any directors? I mean, I think we'll obviously leave everyone with some suggestions for kind of looking at your work. But apart from your work, is there any other filmmakers that you find particularly interesting, like in terms of cinematically?
No, basically, I'm interested. You know, it doesn't matter if it's present or past filmmaker. When I like the work, I would trust them. Let's take even Fassbinder. So I think Fassbinder for me is one of the few post-war German figures, like Pina Bausch in choreography or like Joseph Beuys in visual arts, who tried to continue something which was interrupted by the Nazis. So since I trust and I'm interested in the point of view of Fassbinder, so he would do a mellow film like Lili Marlene with Hannah Shigula. I think it's interesting. He would do this fantastic series, Alexanderplatz. I would watch it. He would do an interview with his mother in Germany, the year zero. I would watch it. So I'm interested in the even eclectic and hybrid nature of him, you know. So I think that when to my sense, I identify a filmmaker, which I find a very consistent research, formal, thematic, subject-wise, storytelling, and so on, then I would follow him. I would watch everything I can. In a way, I would say even that mostly I like more filmmakers than films even. I'm not a cinephile. Most of you know more about world cinema than I do, but some filmmakers I like a lot and I respect a lot. And even about myself, the prizes that I'm most proud that I ever got is that I got twice the Roberto Rossellini Prize. I got the Robert Bresson. I got the Parajanov Prize. So filmmakers that I like, I'm very, very happy that they consider me. Or even when I was in Edinburgh about 5 years ago, and they asked me to be the chairman of the Powell Prize for British Cinema. Obviously, Powell is a great filmmaker, so I was very happy. So I think that I love filmmaker, independent thinkers, which through the medium of cinema, but they're not normally provincial, not in the sense of being from a certain nation, but they're not just professional in the bad sense of the word filmmakers. They are interested in arts, in literature, in politics, in history, in anything. So they are very cultivated sources, and that is something that I appreciate. So I would say, you know, there are Brazilian directors, there are Indian, obviously, Gatak and Mr Gitai, and so on. So I think that it's people on the one hand which are very close to their own culture, like Gatak or Sataji Trey and so on. So they give us a very close look at their own culture, but when you're very close to your culture, you also say something really universal. So.
Thank you, that is great. I also had a question, why did you shoot Anna Arabia as one shot?
No, because, you know, the film tells about relations between Jews and Arabs in Israel. And because I don't want this relation to cut, to separate the two groups, when I translate this sentence that I don't want to cut to the language, to the syntax of cinema, I don't cut. So I have one shot. 81 minutes.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Also, the Kippur, we had another question. Kippur from 2000, Yom Kippur. It is one of the best films, anti-war films. How did you come to make an anti-war film from a war film? I mean, this was the question.
Well, because I was looking, we spoke earlier about, with your friend from Sarajevo, about the war and so on. You know, I wanted to make a film about my own point. The most complicated thing about film is to establish a point of view. So I wanted to install my point of view of being in a war. And also the war is a chaotic event. It's a mess. It's not so structured. It's not like the nice Hollywoodian films that sometimes would see two lines of tanks with beautiful lighting going to the war. It's a chaos. It's a mess. It's a rupture. So I went back to my memory. Actually, the person who encouraged me to do the film was Fuller, Samuel Fuller. So he always told me, you have to go and tell your story. And that's it. Great. So I look forward to see you next time. And it was nice to talk to all of you. And maybe one day I'll come again to Edinburgh. I had in a small hotel in Edinburgh, a very beautiful selection of different whiskeys. So we can check it. And thank you for the invitation. And we'll speak next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. It is a pleasure and honor to have you here with us. I hope we will meet again when circumstances allow in Edinburgh, as you say, at the festivals or beyond. So, and thank you everyone who attended and asked questions. I thank you for joining us. This is the first day of our launch. Tomorrow, feel free to join us again at 6 o'clock. We'll have a workshop entitled The Holocaust in the Czechoslovak New Wave, where we'll have several panelists join us from Prague, from Toronto, and from the UK as well. So, and Amos as well. Yes, thank you again. And I wish everyone.
Thank you, Mina. It was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amos.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amos.
Incredible. Yeah, wonderful.
More questions to follow.
My mother said we always have to keep something for the next time.